I think you have more agency than you think. It's very easy to live in 2025 and think, oh my goodness, there's just so much crisis out there. Everything starts with you. Some of the most important things you can do are very simple. My clients live everywhere. I'm telling you now, we are no worse in terms of our sort of crime and crime stats than any major European city right now. I think sometimes people talk about the limitations in a very much a state of inaction with everything that's going wrong in the world. Yeah, there's lots of things that are going wrong in the world. But again, individually, we still have so much agency to make change.
Hi, I'm Caroline Cary and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief and tenacity, we can make so many things happen.
So I'm very excited this morning to welcome Kate Bright, who is CEO and founder of Umbra International. It's a company that's reshaping the security industry with holistic and accessible solutions. With over 25 years of experience in the security and private client sectors, Kate is a chartered security professional known for her work in physical, digital, reputational and emotional security. She's a passionate advocate for veterans, diversity and leadership, reducing violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and safety for all, and regularly speaks on topics such as invisible security and secure lifestyles. Kate, I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you on here. We met, I think, through a female founders group. And I've always known you as a protected bodyguard. So tell me, how on earth did you get into this whole business?
Yeah, so, well, in fact, hearing that you describe the introduction, it does make me think that there's a lot going on. But yeah, no, my journey, I always say, is very much a squiggly career to where I am now. But I do credit the close protection or bodyguard training with being a big light bulb moment between what I call my first and my second career. So private client, always worked in what we call single family office spaces, a space in private wealth that has really exploded in the last 25 years. I've been very lucky that's the period in which I started out working, started very much on the shop floor of the admin and logistical and operational side of three very high profile, high wealth families through my first career. And then, just really saw an opportunity to create a different way of delivering security. And I think the genesis of that was actually doing my close protection bodyguard training. So that's the headline that people think about with us as a business is my own founder story, which is no bad thing. I think any founder out there has their light bulb moment. And it is a golden thread that runs through our business. I do believe, as you said, invisible security. Little did I know 25 years ago that not only is the blend of genders and mindsets a really useful part of diverse security, it makes it much more invisible, but actually the rise in digital security, and you talked and we'll touch on reputational security, but these are things you can't feel, they're intangible. So I think way back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, when I was building up to the start of Umbra, I think I couldn't have imagined how the term invisible security would evolve to ride that crest of that wave. So it's been a very interesting time setting up and growing the business. And we've definitely come into a space that even the word security, it means so many different things just to different people. And it's a word that's, I think, come with a lot of misconceptions. Certainly it did for me when I was managing the security function in my first career. And really my goal has been to make it much more accessible, much more navigable, help our clients to invest and realize a return on their investment in what we call the 4 pillars that you just described. But actually, ultimately, it's about a feeling of safety. And above all, as a founder, you set out your business stall. And if you don't have that mission in mind. Ultimately for me as the founder of this business is to be able to showcase to everybody, and particularly those here listening today, that it's not something that is the preserve of those that can afford it. And that's just cut me open now. That's what I'm put on this planet to do, is to try and spread the word that, we want to make the world a safer place as a business, but as a founder, I really want to spread the message that a lot of the things that we do in the day job are much more accessible than we all think.
So security, I mean, honestly, there's never been a more important time to be doing that. Let's go back to the invisible security, because everyone imagines security guards, it's all very, people in black, and you can see them, and it's an alert, isn't it? Whereas now we need to be much, much more careful about that.
Yeah, I think that, I've been very lucky in some senses that in the last 25 years, everyone thinks about physical security first when you say the word security. And I think this last couple of decades, we're all united by that sense of overwhelm. I certainly feel it, and I feel it for my family, and particularly the young people in my family, where the digital piece is just not something that we had to deal with. And, when I was at school in the 90s and 80s. So this the invisible risks that are around us, but also the invisibility with which a lot of risk now presents itself. I think, we're as a business, I'm as a founder trying to kind of shift that perception, not least of which from my gender as a founder of a business that works within the security industry. But also, I think people think of security in silos. So part of our whole mission is to create a more holistic view of those 4 pillars, and having now owning and trademarking even things like secure lifestyle and the 4 pillars of a secure lifestyle. We're not doing it as some sort of, mad ego dash. It's actually because we really want to propagate this message that, everybody deserves to live a secure lifestyle, and it does encompass the physical and the digital. And I think sometimes when I'm in a room and I'm, presenting as a woman who still holds a close protection license, so I still keep my license active. I requalified and I keep my CPD. My continuous professional development is a key part of, my business life. I didn't have to become a ROSPA police driver 2 years ago, but if I was going to do it, I wanted to get gold, and I did. This idea that as a business, if we're not pushing on the standards ourselves to understand what a secure lifestyle is and what is it to be in protective security in 2025, actually, I am boots on the ground and on the shop floor, in the engine room, whatever metaphor you want to use, as well as actually looking at where public safety is going. And it's definitely something that, particularly to give people takeaways from today, the best form of security is community. And that is something that I say to my clients every day. Being part of keeping each other safe is something that is actually way more accessible than we all give credit to.
So you talk about the 4 pillars. So can you just break those down? Obviously, I mentioned them earlier on the introduction, but can you just break them down? Because they're all very different, aren't they? But they're all interconnected.
Yes. So we know what physical security is. It's the most sort of obvious of the pillars. So physical, digital, reputational, and emotional. The digital, everything that is the sort of cyber IT. Again, words that get thrown around where we don't necessarily know what they tangibly mean. IT, cyber, digital risk being a sort of a kind of one size fits all. Actually, for some people, it's how they exist on their smartphone, and for others, it's how to keep a corporate IT security infrastructure safe and build a cyber culture within a large number of people, because people are at the front line of all digital threat. The reputational piece, people sort of say, reputational management. Actually, it's reputational security. I think every person deserves to have some form of protection around their success. And I think that goes back to any person who has any sort of digital profile. I do believe that it is something that is hard fought. And I know from my own experience, I've worked really hard to build my business, and I've been very much above the radar doing the TEDx talks. I made a decision to be very much visible within my sector. That is a choice that I've made, and I deserve to be able to have the same protections as those that decide to have a layer of privacy to their reputation. So the reputational security pillar is one where You can be as high profile or as low profile, as high wealth or as low wealth. There are a common sort of thread of themes. If people are starting to have opinions about you online, that I know from personal experience can be incredibly destabilizing for individuals to deal with, and it can affect and impact your physical security. And that's sometimes some things that are of our own clients making, their opinions, their stance, their political colours, or their willingness to share their opinions is sometimes something that causes huge physical vulnerability. And the fourth pillar, emotional, and we have a number of very alpha type clients, male and female, who sort of say, "Oh, what's this emotional security? It sounds a bit fluffy to me."
It sounds about female and fluffy. It's about exactly.
and then I swap it out with the term high performance security, and they're like, "Okay, what's that?" And then I say, well, physical, mental and cognitive health is your front line of risk resilience. What does that mean? Well, you're more likely to perceive risk and threat in a disproportionate way if you're not feeling well. And we've all been there. We've all seen and clicked on the link that we wouldn't have had we not been tired on a Friday at 5 p.m. So for me, the biggest part of Umbra's legacy, I think, is going to be having brought and crashed this idea of high performance or health and safety together with that fourth pillar. And actually, I can tell you now from 28 years of experience, it's the first thing I ask my clients when I meet them, particularly if they're going through a crisis, is how are you? Yeah, how are you feeling? What is your perception of what's going on? A bit like a GP, or in A&E terms, a bit like that front desk, where it's like, what's going on? How is this presenting for you? Whether that's you've had a burglary, whether it's you've been hacked, whether it's someone's taken a swipe at you in an open forum, whether you've had media intrusion, or whether you've had, increasingly this emotional security pillar and this health-related pillar. Actually, it's the younger generations who perhaps are struggling, or somebody who's having a high-profile issue, or who's had a very sudden physical illness that's going to mean some sort of change to a family dynamic, whether that's that person can't run that business anymore and somebody's got to take over. And we see high profile examples of succession in terms of the show or the royal family. I think we need to actually think about our own lives, and actually if we were working in whatever size of a family business, imagine the same things happen to those of us that are not in the public eye and of high wealth. And we've got to make changes. We've got to actually feel like we can take over at those moments of change, which can be hugely emotionally draining. I mean, grief and death and disruption, divorces. We work with a lot of people going through high-profile divorces. They can change how you feel. They can change your physical health in some cases. So we're always working back to front, because how a client perceives their risk, how emotionally secure they are, will impact how reputationally, digitally, and physically safe they're going to be. And we're working hard to data back that statement, so that when we're sat in front of our very demanding clients saying, why should this be so important? We can then say, stats like 60% of all of our projects start with the emotional security pillar. And of those, 70% are entirely preventable if that individual hadn't had that issue physical health wise or mental health wise, or if there had been a perception of risk that had been commensurate with that threat. For example, a cyber culture within even a small private or family office. If that's not embedded, then you're putting your people at the front line of risk, and you're not preparing them accordingly. So it's a really interesting emerging area, and it's definitely something that it humanizes security, and we believe in humanizing the secure lifestyle experience. Otherwise, we're just telling people how to be safe without any kind of sense of empathy, which is not what I'm in the business of.
But I think that's because it's changed, and because everything's so much more accessible, also with the digital side. And, it can affect people, can't they? Because actually, if they go through something emotional, they can click on links, do all sorts of things. There's all sorts of things they do because they're not thinking straight. And I think that's really interesting. So it leads me on to, in your experience, what's the biggest security threat that everyday people face, and how can they protect themselves?
I think people would obviously go to physical risk. And I think, if I think about my own family, it's the thing I'm most worried about. And I think some of the perception of risk and threat goes back to gut instinct and situational awareness. And gut instinct, without going back to the emotional security pillar, is literally what it says on the tin. It's your perception of risk and threat. So there's some really good situational awareness, sort of bystander training that's openly available for free. We've got it on our Secure Lifestyle Toolkit on the website, but companies like L'Oreal a few years ago brought out a really good e-learning course around what to do when you see something that's not right, when to stand up for that person or that situation, and when to walk away. I think that's something that anybody listening now could have a go at looking at, that idea of being a better community citizen. Looking out for others is sometimes actually the best way of protecting ourselves. Back to that safety and community piece that I believe in so vehemently. And I think linked to that, probably first aid training. I think it's something that everybody should be able to, I'm a sort of not so closet control freak. Most founders of businesses, I think, would resonate with that. But not knowing how to solve a situation with physical health presented to me, whether it's somebody I love or whether it's somebody who's that I don't even know on the street. I think that's one of the best investments we can make in ourselves and each other. Recently I was on the tube and a guy in front of me was, I thought, sleeping, and his phone sort of fell out of his hand, and I went to pick it up and pop it back in his hand, and he didn't wake up. And so, even the most basic training that I did as part of my close protection top-up training, there was at that time no pulse. It turns out he had a very slow pulse, and he woke up with me staring across his face, having pulled one of his earpods out. But I think that goes back to my final part of the what can you do today? Don't walk around, with two of these in your ears. Be situationally aware. Otherwise, you might wake up on the tube with a low rest. And as he ran out of the tube, because I'd managed to make sure that he didn't miss his stop, I did say, look, you go and see a doctor because you've got a really low resting heart rate, because I couldn't feel a pulse, and then suddenly it was a very weak one. But being able to actually step in that situation. I don't know, there's just something, people have mixed views on it. Why should I get involved? Why is it? Well, imagine it's your son or your daughter on that tube and it isn't a low resting pulse rate. And, the giant blonde lady steps in and actually pulls the cord, gets the person down there and, maybe saves someone's life. I think we forget in this post-technological age how human we really are. And I think us humans just need to become really exceptional at being very tribally community-minded rather than breaking ourselves down into individual kind of unit parts. We got into this thing together, and I think that's how we should look at our own security. That's where the term security came from. Was the securists, making sure that we have enough food storage for the winter. It was very much, it wasn't about locking it away and making sure no one could get to it. It was about sharing it. It was about, I think that study of where we all started to, I was thinking only yesterday, when did the first lock get put on the first door? That must have been a bit like AI, a shift in collective mindset of, trust and community and, keeping those out and, keeping us in. I obviously think quite deeply about these things.
It's very interesting. You talk about locks on doors because, there's other security. For example, I remember when we had puppies actually here, and it was a space where people were having their puppies stolen. And actually we started locking the back door all the time because actually locally there were puppies being stolen, and also if you got things on Instagram, people know where you are, so that's the security. So that's just an everyday thing that we seem to forget about. And I think with the sort of the app, is it the app that's next door? I think you've talked about that.
Yeah,
because that's quite a big thing, isn't it?
It is, and I sit as I'm on the Safer Neighbourhood Policing panel. I forget the acronym. Where I live in London as the co-chair. I took on that role mostly because I was very interested in this idea of layered community safety and how, if a community comes together, businesses, residents, police, we all have our part to play. We sort of sit there sometimes thinking, right, police, what are you doing? There's not enough of them. And, my interactions with policing where I live in London is really actually very positive. And they're very open and honest. And they say, well, actually, if we could get on board with this idea that businesses play their part, residents play their part with an aging population and apps like Nextdoor, if something doesn't feel right, back to the situational awareness, start to socialize it. Your group, your community WhatsApp group, your street WhatsApp group is actually, if you mute it for sanity, is actually a really good place to pop intelligence and also to keep each other safe. And from my experience with the policing panel, police are actually using apps like Nextdoor to soak up intelligence. And so I would say, with an aging population, what can we do to encourage those individuals for whom they might be slightly more limited in terms of mobility in their homes? How can we encourage them to be part of putting into that rich tapestry of intelligence? And I think if you're not on your street or kind of community WhatsApp group, or at least have someone designated in your family or your home to be on those kind of groups, I think you're missing a trick. Because yes, some people will be sort of pointing out things that, perhaps don't need to be pointed out, that person's been around for too long. But actually, in that one case where, something doesn't feel right, isn't right, I think there's a lot of benefit in, the community aspect, the cohesion aspect, information in one place, crime mapping. If police don't have crime mapped, they can't put resource to it. So it's this sort of chicken and egg of, do we live in a time with more crime, or are we able to map it more than we ever were in, say, 1984? One thing I learned as a result of this local policing panel is, I think 1974 was when murder stats started to be produced every year. And so the murder stats have pretty much stayed the same 1974 to now. We obviously have different kinds of crimes that are being committed. That's, crime does evolve. And I'm not saying that, there's less crime or worse crime. My clients live everywhere. I'm telling you now, we are no worse in terms of our sort of crime and crime stats than any major European city right now, or in European or even more of a global context. And clients that live between South America, the UK, Europe, there's some stuff going on out there where there's not a nice little community co-chair panel bringing businesses together. So I think we have to be very relative to what we expect from others to keep us safe. I always say this particularly about police and law enforcement. There are, I think, 40, 50, whatever thousand police in the UK. There are 450,000 security licenses in the UK today. So what are we expecting from this, again, word security? Who's protecting who from what? And what is the individual's responsibility to keep us all safe? I think the latter with the former, and all of the limitations that we know we have within our public law enforcement. I think there's a lot of positives to be gained from this kind of conversation. As well as, really facing some of the limitations. But I think sometimes people talk about the limitations in a very much a state of inaction with everything that's going wrong in the world. Yeah, there's lots of things that are going wrong in the world. But again, individually, we still have so much agency to make change.
So I just wanted to thank Maggie Wellness for sponsoring this podcast. I have always been really lucky with my hair. It's always been full and healthy. I've never really needed much help. But then I was lucky enough to try some of the products from Maggie Wellness. And I cannot tell you, my hair is so much fuller, shinier, and it's growing faster than ever. If you're dealing with thinning hair, breakage, or hair loss, their shampoo, conditioner, rejuvenating serum, and supplements are designed to nourish the scalp and support healthy hair growth. What I really love too is that there are no harsh chemicals. Maggie Wellness products are 100% vegan, cruelty-free and free from SLS, silicons, parabens, GMOs and PEGs, and they're all in beautiful, sustainable packaging. So if you want stronger, healthier hair, why not try some of Maggie Wellness products? And you can get 20% off, excluding bundles, with the code EAT20. If you go to the bottom of this podcast, you can see the code EAT20, and there's the link.
So you talk about how many people are in it. So as a female, what is the percentage of females are in the security world and have the sort of training that you've had?
So when I did my TEDx talk, I was quoting 4.25% of around 16,000. I'm pleased to say, so that was 2018, 18, 19, 20. So 7 years later, it's 6.88%. So like desperately slow, but I like to think that I've been some small part of a 2% change. And I think what we need to kind of also keep in mind is that of the wider security sector, about 10% of the security guarding licenses, there's different types of license, of which the close protection is one of. Security guarding, door supervision, you'll see those licenses on people's arms in nighttime environments. And then CCTV is the fourth license. And about 10% of the wider sector is female. It actually, fun fact, mirrors that of the British Army. I sit on the British Army Gender Advisory Committee. And 10% of British Army Tri-Service is female at the sort of current kind of calculations. And I'm always interested in this idea of diversity in security, not because I am a woman, but because as an operational security person and security management and governance experienced individual, I can see firsthand from my boots on the ground how well it works when, strip out the gender, when you've got diverse operators working, even in public safety. That description I just gave you of businesses, residents all coming together, they're all their own little mini bodyguards of sorts. Yeah. When you've got those different minds coming together, it's quite a different experience to that person's going to keep me safe. I think you benefit from mindset, background, all of the different things that make even you and I different as two women. So I'm always at pains to say that, albeit in close protection specifically, and for our clients, we're always being asked for female operators, and there are a smaller number, and therefore it's harder for us to place those individuals, particularly where the demand for female specific security sits still mainly in and around family environments, people with children, much more of a sort of blended approach. I think some of our clients really do value the mix of genders, because it's a very physically, you can see someone's physical gender difference oftentimes more than you can see that you and I went to different schools or different education backgrounds or whatever it is. So the female aspect of it's funny because it follows me around, and I've done various interviews over the years, one for a national newspaper specifically around women in close protection, and the women in the protective part of the security sector have normally come from military or law enforcement or royalty protection backgrounds, but increasingly they're coming from more of the civilian sector, like is my own experience. And again, from operational experience, I've without a military background, sometimes been very useful for my language skills, for my knowledge, for my black book, to make things go more smoothly. So I think it's very compelling when I'm meeting daily new individuals wanting to come into every part of the security sector, where they'll say, I'm not from X background or Y background. But what are your wider skills? And I think it's a really interesting time for the industry. We've really got to think about where the future of the talent base is going to come from. And certainly with my friendships across military and law enforcement, I don't want to be seen as a single-handedly picking out everybody from the public sector to come and work in the private sector. It's a great transition. It's a great I say retirement. People think of retirement as something one does when one's older. But if you're coming out of something like law enforcement or military, normally 22 years, if you started when you're 16, 17, 18, you still got, I'm 46. I feel like I'm, coming into another gear shift. So actually it can be, for some people, certain parts of security management or operational security can be a really good transition. For others, it's not at all. So we're going to need to really think about, with a contracting military and law enforcement, where are we going to get the future security personnel from? That's why I'm talking so widely about community safety, because I think we've got, we're not able to attract people to go into the police force. We're not able to necessarily join some of the dots on encouraging young people to think about a military or tri-service career as being I think, one of the most epic career paths you can have, particularly if you don't know what you want to do. Going into some part of security, even if it's the cybersecurity sector, we are woefully ill-equipped as the UK. We have, I believe, a civil service fast stream, cyber fast track that, is sort of openly recruiting. And if there's young people listening that want any advice from me, if I could wind back the clock and I was, an age looking at even a career pivot, it would be some form of protection or wider sort of public protection, despite, I think, some of the loud, very obvious, issues and problems that particularly, policing, for example, has faced over the last few years. You can't change something unless you're within it. And so it might not be for everybody, but I do think there's a huge amount of opportunity for young people who are looking at where and how they can make a difference. I think some public sector experience, particularly military, I think would actually be something that would set you apart. And I see CVs all day long of people that have come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and it's incredible to actually see what people have done, how they've carved their first careers, and what they're prepared to do in the protection of other people. I think it's quite inspiring.
So I come from, my husband was in the military. So he was in the military till 55 and then retired. As you say, it's 55. That's a young age, isn't it? Mm. So a lot of people coming from, you can see why people go into security from the police force, from the army, because actually there's a discipline there. There's something, we were around when we lived in Germany, when our cars were inspected. You couldn't go in. You had to take the mirrors. You had mirrors underneath your cars. You had security all the time. You were having to watch out. You had to go on courses and learn about it. So I became very aware of security. And actually, my husband won't sit in a restaurant with his back to the door. Always has to sit forward because he had has been on operational service. So you can say, so how does one encourage people from other walks of life to come into the security service, do you think?
I think firstly, it's an understanding of what it is to be safe, feel safe, back to the emotional security part again. I think if you're someone who's interested in community, first and foremost, I think it's something that would interest you. I think the ability to work in a more flexible way and freelance way, there's quite a lot of opportunity to travel and to, from a physical security point of view, and then also much more of a pathway to management. So in the last 10 years, I've just been very lucky that I've been able to take some of the evolution of the security chartered pathways, for example, and now as a chartered security professional, again, there's only about 300, I think, in the world, of which obviously 30 are female. It's like this 10% follows me everywhere I go. But, I think there's the professionalizing of it, even if, as I love the operational side of it, I think it is good to, if you are more of a security manager, equally, I think it's really good for you to get on the shop floor occasionally. I think it's not for everybody. I think we've got a perception problem still, door supervision, DS licenses. People will think, well, actually, friends of mine made a lot of money at university and were able to not have hangovers by working and protecting people at the student union, and had great experience of that. I think the perception piece, can women get into the sector physically? Is it physical protection much more of a sort of masculine job? I think we've answered that already in the sort of 2025 modern risk and threat. There's just so much more that it's all about other than gender. But I think if I was looking at it as a younger person, it's definitely something that you could add to a portfolio career. It's definitely something that, a bit like having a PT license, for some PT training course, it's another skill, another string to your bow. And as I always say, I thought I was going to be a teacher when I left university. And
Did you? That's so funny.
Yeah, I did 2 days teacher training, and I was like, I love children, just not that much. And I didn't waste my time, so actually trying things out, going and asking people that are working in the sector if you can have experience with them. As I say, the cyber sector, there's so much more to it than just sort of IT. There's so much more that the civil service and fast stream civil service are doing for those with a high performance mindset that can't see themselves working in protective physical security. So I think each to their own, but Yeah, if anyone wants to chat more, I'm constantly meeting people and helping to sort of signpost people in different directions.
So, can you give a couple of real life situations where security made such a difference? Some things that you've been involved in.
We've had lots of sort of a real pace of cyber attacks recently as a business, and me personally. People calling me sort of with bank transfers, and we've got safe words we use in the business. So I was asking, okay, cool, what's the safe word? And the phone goes dead. So I think there's the sort of the people think about physical things that can go wrong. Actually, a lot of times it's the destabilizing digital and financial fraud threats that you can face as an individual can be they can be just as sticky. I think from an operational point of view, I think always the most difficult things or difficult situations that I've worked in personally, operationally, have been in kind of like nighttime or noisy bars, clubs, those kind of environments when you're trying to keep somebody safe, because it's a very unpredictable environment. And to your husband's point, I actually like knowing how to get out of a place. It's not because I'm from a military background, just because I think maybe I do think there's a real benefit in having a security mindset that you apply to your life. So this idea of secure lifestyle. It's only when you have to think about how you get out of a room or auditorium or a concert environment and you don't know because you haven't thought about it, that's when you're going to need it. So a little bit of healthy situational awareness has always stood me in good stead, because I think some of the things that you think about when you think about security is you must have stepped in front of a bullet, or the example of Trump and the shooting, and you're there to protect. But I think if you're in that situation, something's gone wrong. Your whole kind of plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G is to make sure that you're so prepared. There's sort of scenarios and situational sort of planning that should mitigate all of these things happening. And also then I think that the biggest things that I've experienced security threat and risk wise have been communication failures. I thought you said this, I thought you said that. Language barriers, local intelligence that's not been right, or not having the right people helping with the right kind of airport transfers. Movement and travel can be really high risk moments. Even for us normal people, going to and from places. We come out of an airport and we're tired after a 10-hour flight and we're trying to find a thing to take us to an unknown place. It's things like that actually have been, I think, the most challenging, should I say.
I think you've mentioned that a lot. I've listened to other things that you've done. You talked about planning, because if you're planning and you've put the plans in place, you've thought it through, you've looked at the whole scenario, then some of the situations shouldn't happen. It shouldn't go wrong.
Yeah, prior preparation prevents poor performance. I think it's why I started 28 years ago I'm a real planner, and my career was all about planning. If you've got plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you won't run out of plans. And I think that agility, that ability to sort of always have another solution or another way or another. When you run out of solutions, that's when your back's against the wall, literally. And so I think having a very kind of, there's an element of creativity also to the sort of security process, where you've got to be agile, you've got to be able to cognitively think, and I go back to some of the best individuals that I've worked with over the years are able to be very clear, very cognitively clear. And I've learned from some amazing people, amazing mentors in my life, for whom their perception of what should be done next when they're under pressure only is enhanced. And that is something you can train in your brain. And I'm doing a lot of brain training at the moment. I had my brain map last year. I'm under a neuropsychologist's care. I'm doing a brain optimization program. I think it's going to be something that we all think about as normal in sort of 5 years' time. And it's certainly something that has added to my, I do it for my physical body. Why on earth would I not do it for my brain? And it's actually really been something I'm finding. I now understand the clarity of being able to hold thought and clear your mind when you're in a crisis. You can train that. Anybody listening to this can train it. There's apps like Elevate that I was using for the last couple of years, but the sort of clarity in a crisis, you can train yourself around that. And it's something that, again, like with situational awareness training, it's something that I see in some of the best operators that I've worked with.
You're incredible, actually. Just what you're doing now. You also speak. I think you speak 2 or 3 languages, don't you? And you understand Russian, etc. as well.
Yeah, no. So my degree was in French. I grew up in a German-speaking house, and as you do when you're rebelling, I decided to do a French degree. When I go to speak German, because I understand, French comes out. It's the most curious thing. And then, the people I've worked for over the years, I've asked to have tutors when in the family office environment that I was working within, and certainly understanding even the basics. I picked that up from my parents, being able to communicate and being able to actually articulate yourself in another language. Again, it's something that it's a cross-community thing that must be sort of baked within me. And I think going back to the community safety aspect, if you can land somewhere strange, speak the language, even basically, hear words that aren't right, hear words that are right, even basic things where you can kind of then start to say, there may be something I need to change here, or this feels right and I understand this. Comprehension and security and safety do go hand in hand. But the language piece, I think I never really realised how important that was in sort of security skill sets until, when I set the business up. There was a reason I put international onto Umbra, is because our clients are global citizens. And actually, I'm Irish, Bavarian, Danish, British. Being able to kind of like pull out a few little things, it's connection with others, right? And I think it goes back to that sort of sense for me anyway of, really kind of trying to connect with people. Community safety is about collective comprehension. And if we can understand each other better, why not make the effort? And as an Anglophile as well, I think we take for granted the fact that we are the world's common operating language. Well, let's mess around with that a little bit. Get on Duolingo, see if great for your brain, great to start thinking, about using another language. Even using Google Translate, is better than, and trying things out, when you're in a foreign city. I know that Parisians speak back to you in English. With a degree, they still speak to me back in English. And I still speak back in French. So, push your brain, push your thinking. Yeah. And communication and clarity of communication has saved me in so many different situations.
I think there's every day-to-day stuff that you can do. People talk about exercising, they talk about the mental health, etc. But there are things that you can do every day to day that trains that actually you haven't got to go and study or do it. It's like there's a lovely girl who does Reclaim Movement. It's about movement, day-to-day movement in your life, and the same with language. So let's go back to the warm and fuzzy side. So how do you practice self-care in your daily life?
God, it's like from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. And that goes from, a good decade or so where I didn't really understand it. We didn't really have all of the tools that we have now to understand how to experiment with ways that make you feel better. And so, everything that really for me in the last, I would say 6 to 10 years, it started with I did a Vedic meditation course about 15 years ago. And that was the start of my kind of brain journey, really kind of trying to clear my brain. I've got a very, very busy brain, always making connections, always thinking. I didn't really understand or embrace this idea of being creative. The entrepreneur term has never really, I had to set my business up because I had an idea. I didn't see it as an entrepreneurial activity. So I've been kind of trying to catch up with allowing my brain to really to create space for my brain. And I think that's the best self-care that I'm doing at the moment is brain related, because I thought it was all about physical stuff. So I grew up, I've got 2 brothers. So for me, it was a lot of my earlier life was about competition and physical sort of prowess, hardly. But, I hit the CrossFit boom. I did marathons, all that kind of stuff, which you think, that's me looking after myself. Actually, you hit your 40s and you try and do, which I did, Brighton Marathon. Took me out for about 9 months. I had to rebuild my body and my mind after that. And I was doing it in memory of a dear friend that I'd lost as well. And I think I really started to understand that self-care isn't actually, for me, buying stuff is a great way of me feeling like, well, I've got my AcuMat now, so I can use the thing. Actually, it's as simple for me as creating a space between being awake and on and being asleep and off, and rest and nervous system regulation. We didn't have these terms. We didn't know about the vagus nerve. We didn't know about emotional regulation. And actually some of the work we're doing in emotional security, being able to really verbalize this high performance aspect, is the best example of emotional regulation is box breathing. And box breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, it is one way, if you're in a situation where you want more clarity, is science-backed, used by Navy SEALs to create a more safe outcome, because you will perceive things in a much more regulated way. So wait, self-regulation and security in the same literal breath, Navy SEAL backed, guys. I'm not, this isn't Kate's fluffy thing. Breath work for me has been transformational, certainly to help me to down regulate, to sort of get into my self-care mode. I've always been a big fan of things like yoga and Pilates. I think Reformer Pilates was created by God himself. Certainly for me, I'm very tall, so it's the one thing that really does help me to feel, like I've had a proper workout. But I think because I've done a lot of US travel over the years, understanding where the US health market has gone. I've always been 5 years ahead of, I think I went to a gong healing workshop about 15 years ago, came back here and people were thinking, gong. I think I said to someone, do you want to come to a sound bath? And they brought their swim kit. And I was like, oh, no, you don't need a swim kit. It's cool. And Leo Cosendai, who does his 4-person gong at the other house in South Kent, I refer him to clients regularly, because I think the power of finding the thing that works and chimes for you can be in the most simple of places. And it's because of Leo that I listen to binaural sounds on the tube to block out the noise. Obviously one ear in, one ear out, just for those people from earlier. But self-care, creating space for me, like days on the weekend, like a Sunday is a very special day where I see people that I want to catch up with family, and really try and make sure that my weeks, my 7 days, really sort of I look back, and that's as the saying goes, if you tell me your priorities, or show me your diary, I'll tell you your priorities. Everything I do for myself is time blocked. My entire team see my entire diary 7 days a week. I want them to know that, on Friday morning, if I've made my 9:30 yoga class, I say on my team call at 9 o'clock, I'm really going to try and go. And if I go, they're all, I think, delighted that I'm not around for an hour. Really want to make sure that, when one of the team was ill recently, we're very good at, packing off ginger shots and things like that. But again, I'm more interested in people not getting ill. I'm more interested in some of the things that I did last year. I had a full medical. It's the first time I've had full body MRI scans. Really not enjoyable, but, was great and enjoyable to get a clean bill of health. I pushed my doctor and asked for a DEXA scan so that I could kind of start to really understand how self-care, physical health, all of that sort of stuff starts to knit together, particularly being 46. Wait till it takes control of you, or maybe take a little bit of control back. And it really is simple stuff that, for me, getting up in the morning, getting some sunlight, doesn't have to be sunny. That's a whole common thing. We all live in a really miserable place. It's light in the morning. I've got light boxes at my home desk, light boxes at my work desk, light in the morning, the right sort of nutrition, and a little bit of moderation. I still like to have fun, but it's what fun is for my body now at 46 is not what it was at 26.
I think that's such an important thing, but also I think we have, I'm a little bit older than you, but I think one has to I have a responsibility for my family, that I'm going to stay strong and healthy into my later years. And actually, I've done a lot of stuff. In fact, I took all the harmful known chemicals out of it goes back to my story, 27 years ago, because of our daughter who went through a challenge. We home educated our children, then our 30s, until they're 12. We did a lot of things really early and was slightly ostracized for some of it. But actually, I'm now so proud of what we did. And it's lovely to see all these things coming together. And I think one of the things that I was going to ask you earlier was, well, actually say to you that we can't take some of these real issues, problems away. We can't take away some of the issues that we're living with. We have to live with them and learn how to do that. And I think that's something you're obviously really, really being incredibly clever with in terms of the security world, because rather than just saying to the children, you can't have social media, or you can't use your computers, whatever, or you can't go outside. They are living with it. We're living, breathing the whole thing, aren't we?
So, and I think I say about 8 times a day, every time I meet a new client, we're going to help you control the controllables, and we're going to help you let go of the uncontrollables. I'll add to that. I think you should be very proud of what you've done, because early adopters and people who are prepared to stand up to things that are not right in whatever way, shape or form that feels for you, as long as that's right for you, that should be a judgment-free zone. And I think the unit of the family is the place where you can actually create that secure, safe mindset for young people to be able to say, look, we're going to do it slightly differently. And be prepared to say when something has worked and hasn't worked. I've done so many things over the years, both in going back to the sort of the self-care point, but also as a business, that haven't worked. But we're going to fail really fast, and we're going to fail forwards, and we're going to fail into, if emotional security as a fourth pillar morphs into, I don't know, high performance security, or great, fantastic, we'll just file another trademark application. Like, for me, it's very it's very intuitive, I think, to be working in a poly-crisis world. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's nothing like being in a business and you're faced with March the 13th, 2020, and I know a lot of people will have felt the same way. We didn't know that this wasn't going to be some kind of mass extinction level event. If it had been any more infectious and not that it wasn't from a death rate point of view, of course it was serious, but I think it's the first time in my life that I've faced something where I've thought, wow, I don't really know what this is. Geopolitical stuff, wars, Brexit, 9/11, crashes of things, they stick in my mind as like uni events, one pillar of thing happening. Whereas COVID was a sort of post-Brexit and then kind of more geopolitical shift. And in the last 12 months, we've had, leader of the US, our own country's politics, over half the world going to the polls, shifting ownership of countries' sort of governance. Of course, that's going to have an individual level shift. And so for me in business, I think the sort of distillation of that is, I have to practice what I preach. It starts with me and it ends with me. So I have to take responsibility for myself. I try everything that we are talking about to clients in terms of that sort of physical, mental, cognitive health piece, because I think it's so important and because I can see in my own life how it's benefited me. And I think as a security industry, I'm just really proud and quite flabbergasted at the way the business has grown and how we've managed to actually have a voice. And to your point, we're not going to get everything right all the time, but by being visible, by sharing our knowledge, by sharing the things that have worked for us and our clients very openly, by being very accessible, by creating a bit more opacity, a bit more simplicity, toolkits, checklists. My brain is so simple. That's one of the things I'm working out in this brain training. I like simplicity. I thrive when things are clear. So I think making things clear for other people, making a sector that's probably misunderstood, becomes something that is something I will always champion. The men and women in the sector are incredible, and I want to help people navigate the best of it. Whether they come to our website and take it for free, brilliant. That's a great outcome. Or whether they become our clients, also brilliant. But it all starts with me, and I think that's the one thing I leave with all of our clients is that you can't send me an invoice and I can't give you a nice, neatly tied bow of the word security. This is you and I are going to have to work together. And that's what I'd say to anybody. Be prepared to sit down, have conversations with those around you. Security is a team sport. Peace of mind is a team sport. But you can lead and guide that. And as you've shown within your own family, it takes people to stand up, to implement simple things that feel right, and then iterate from there. Because my Acumat, I tell you what now, it still blimmin' hurts every time I get on it. I don't know how people... And then my other half's daughter lay on it over Christmas and, was there for 20 minutes. We're all different. We all downregulate in different ways. We all get triggered by different things. Safety and community. It's the simple mantra.
So there's so much I can unpack. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but I just want to go back. You've got an incredible resource toolkit on your website. I was looking at it. It's really exciting. I know that I opened my computer and something came up saying that I've been found on the dark web. So I need to start looking at all of that, which is, so I'm going to be looking at resources. So that's all on your website. There's a checklist, resources?
Yes. Yep. So you can message us for the checklist. We'll send that to you. The toolkit's there. I would say in your scenario, one of the things that, send me the screenshot of what it said and I'll give you some advice. One thing that everyone can do from today, free, is set up things like Google Keyword Alert. So if you are then featured online in scenarios that you weren't aware of, that gets sent to you as a daily or weekly email. So forewarned is forearmed. And I think a real sort of reality check, to be that reality check, that it's not if, it's when young people will see harmful content. We've all seen harmful content. We know what it looks like. Making sure that young people know what to do and who to speak to when that happens. And then for something like you've just experienced there, that's reputational security in action. You're saying to me, hang on a minute, I don't want my private, anything about me being featured in a way that I'm not aware of. Is there a risk to me? But being proportionate about how you approach it, what resources you put to it, and how, if anything, you can actually deal with it. And we've had clients who've had individuals who've taken umbrage at their political stance or their opinions. And, sometimes you can do something about it and other times you can't, but you can actually dial up other parts of those pillars. So perhaps there's a LastPass password manager you can start installing. Perhaps you can put multi-factor authentication, that annoying thing that means you have to log in twice and get a code. What's safe is not always convenient, and what's convenient is not always safe.
Yeah.
So it's, again, controllables, uncontrollables. I would say that it's, for me, putting multi-factor, two-factor authentication on things like my own personal email, I think is a really good idea because I value the information that's within it.
Yeah. So finally, what are the 3 things you want our listeners to take away from today's discussion about living securely and protecting themselves in all aspects of their life?
I think you have more agency than you think. You have more control than you think. It's very easy to live in 2025 and think, oh my goodness, everything's just so there's just so much crisis out there. Everything starts with you, and all of the things that you can do to keep you and your family safe start with very simple steps. So it all starts with you. Some of the most important things you can do are very simple. Think about life in those 4 pillars and think every day, what do you need to dial up? What do you need to dial down? And one thing you could probably do, if you're not on a street, community, block, whatever it is, estate, WhatsApp group, set one up. Be that local community hero. In where I live in London, it's meant I've got lifelong friendships and people to be around if I need a washing machine delivered, and thank them with a bottle of wine, and people I would never have gotten to know. I think people think in major cities like London that we don't know our neighbours. I do, because of the WhatsApp group. So using technology to its advantage and not being afraid of adopting things. So I'm always asked about, AI is going to eat us all alive. If it is, I'll go down in flames with lovely neighbours and, a family that I've, cherished and loved. But it's blooming helpful when I'm writing speeches. It's really helpful in so many ways. It's already been embedded in a lot of the technology and things that I use and my clients use. So almost, I think the final part of this puzzle is, as technology moves forward with pace, how can we every day become better, more exceptional humans? And there's so many ways that we can do that. And I think, emotional security, high performance security starts with really simple things that we can do. Daylight doesn't cost any money. Walking, movement doesn't cost any money. Mental clarity, apps like Elevate. I even use the freemium version. I shouldn't say that out loud. There's things we can do. You've got agency. It's simple. Create community, and try and keep a sense of clarity in the chaos, because you will be 99.99% more ahead of those for whom they let the confusion take over.
Kate, it's been lovely. I could talk to you for hours. There's so much more, but so that everyone knows, where can they find you? What's your website, etc.?
So we're on all of the major platforms. So umbrainternational.com is the website, Umbra, UMBRA, international.com. LinkedIn, Instagram at Umbra International, Kate V. Bright on Instagram and LinkedIn. We love hearing from people. We love what you like. We are perfectly imperfect in terms of resources. And if you want our checklist, DM us anywhere and ask, just put the word checklist and we'll send it to you. And we love learning. So things that you're facing, fears that you've got, get in touch. We love wargaming things before they're big problems. So,
Thank you for doing so much for the security world, and you and your team are phenomenal. Thank you, Kate, so much.
Thank you for having me.